Welcome to NewsRap Local. I'm your host, Justin Chapman. Thanks for being here. After providing a few brief updates on this month's local stories, we'll speak with our guest, Martin Gordon of the Pasadena Community Coalition. But before we get started, let's check out these Pasadena media news briefs.
Assemblyman Chris Holden has been appointed chair of the California State Assembly Committee on Appropriations. The committee's primary jurisdiction includes all fiscal bills, bonds, and alternative public financing. Holden chaired the Assembly Committee on Utilities and Energy for 5 years, overseeing public utilities, the California Public Utilities Commission, energy companies, telecommunications, and international trade. He will continue as a member of that committee, as well as the Assembly Committee on Judiciary, the Assembly Committee on Communications and Conveyance, and the Assembly Committee on Environmental Science and Toxic Materials. After being appointed, Holden said, "After serving nearly 24 years on the Pasadena City Council and 9 years in the California State Assembly, I have learned the important balance of maintaining fiscal responsibility and advancing effective public policy. I look forward to working with my colleagues as we endeavor for another impactful legislative session." Pasadena's interim city manager, Cynthia Kurtz, announced that 3 department heads will rotate in the interim assistant city manager position. Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Director Brenda Harvey Williams, Chief Information Officer Philip Leclerc, and Director of Planning and Community Development David Reyes will each serve a 3-month term as the assistant city manager. Harvey Williams will assume the role first. She has been with the city for 34 years and has served as Finance and Management Services Administrator, Acting Deputy Finance Director, Administrative Office Principal Consulting Analyst, and a Management Analyst. Leclerc will take over after Harvey Williams. He has served as the city's Chief Information Officer since 2008 and is responsible for leading the city's technology strategy, IT operations, security, and customer service for the Department of Information Technology. Reyes will take his turn last. As the director of the Planning and Community Development Department, he oversees about 80 employees who review planning proposals and develop land use policies. He also brings nearly 20 years of professional planning experience. With the start of the new year, hundreds of new state laws went into effect beginning January 1st. SB 16 makes more police personnel records subject to public disclosure. AB 127 will allow prosecutors seeking a warrant for a police officer's arrest to go directly to a judge to secure it. SB 241 allows California courts to continue to offer remote civil hearings until July 1st, 2023. SB 320 creates rules to help guarantee that weapons are relinquished after a domestic violence restraining order is issued. AB 453 makes removing a condom without a partner's consent sexual battery, while AB 939 prohibits attorneys from using how a victim was dressed as evidence. Finally, AB 855 means California Native American Day will become a judicial branch holiday, replacing Columbus Day, celebrated on the 4th Friday in September.
I thought it was going to be a slow news month over the holidays. Boy, was I wrong. Let's turn first to our lightning round of news updates. 1. The Omicron surge has continued to disrupt Pasadena. Daily cases were recently 11 times higher than the week of December 20th, the highest numbers in the entire pandemic, although daily cases have just started to decline slightly. The city surpassed 20,000 cumulative cases since the pandemic began, and there have been 377 deaths. Luckily, hospitalizations aren't as high as previous variants and surges, but Huntington Hospital still had more than 100 COVID-infected patients recently, with more than 85% of those in the ICU unvaccinated. Pasadena Public Health Director Dr. Ying Go said the Rose Parade helped contribute to the spread, quote, "without a doubt." While the parade goers were outdoors, all of the visitors who came in from Ohio and Utah for the Rose Bowl game, many of whom were maskless, were in local shops and restaurants, etc. Meanwhile, the city has canceled the Black History Parade and will supplement it with several smaller and virtual events, which some are calling a double standard. The homeless count has also been postponed. Volunteers are still needed for the count, which will now take place on February 22nd and 23rd. 2. Despite the surge, PUSD students are back in the classroom. The district still does not require testing of students, but did set up a testing center at its headquarters that was overwhelmed with traffic. The city issued new health protocols that public and private schools must follow as they reopen. PCC, meanwhile, made the first 2 weeks of the spring semester virtual. 3. City Council approved an amendment in the contract between the Rose Bowl Operating Company and AEG Golden Voice to increase the number of, quote, displacement events allowed each year in and around the stadium. They want to hold more music festivals in order to generate much needed revenue for the stadium as other stadiums open in Southern California. The Rose Bowl Operating Company will come back by April to lay out its long-term plans for the stadium and revenue opportunities. 4. Interim City Manager Cynthia Kurtz has appointed Alex Sotu and Tiffany Jacobs Quinn to serve as rotating interim Human Resources Director, Jeffrey Keitlinger as Acting General Manager of Pasadena Water and Power, David Klug as Acting Economic Development Manager, and Deputy Chief Cheryl Moody as Interim Police Chief until May 2nd, when Commander Jason Clausen will rotate into the position until a new city manager is appointed and chooses their permanent chief. 5. Just 2 months after the Citizen Police Oversight Commission formally convened, the city announced that its new independent police auditor, Brian Mexi, who was supposed to work with the commission, has resigned and is going back to the Seattle Police Department. Members of the Oversight Commission called the news, quote, very disappointing and very disruptive. 6. Longtime PUSD school board member and former president of the board, Scott Phelps, announced that he will not run for re-election for his District 7 seat this year after nearly 18 years on the board. Meanwhile, Dr. Yarma Velasquez, a tenured professor at Cal State Northridge, whose children attend a PUSD school, has announced that she is running for that District 7 seat. She would be the first Latina school board member in the district's history if elected. 7. The technical feasibility analysis and supplemental traffic analysis for the city's acquisition of the 710 stubland have been completed, and now the city is working with Caltrans on the development of a relinquishment agreement. Once the city gets that land back, community input will be gathered about reintegrating that area back into the fabric of the city and land use determination. Despite the city's objections, Pasadena was included in those regulations along with El Sereno, though South Pasadena will have a different set of regulations for the 710 sales, creating inconsistency throughout the corridor. The United Caltrans tenants said the new regulations will negatively impact current tenants. Caltrans is now clear to begin selling the properties immediately. 8. Following the redistricting process, Congressman Adam Schiff's 28th district will become the 30th district, which will include Linda Vista and the Rose Bowl area and a small portion of Northwest Pasadena, but no other parts of Pasadena. Congresswoman Judy Chu's 27th district will become the 28th district and will include West Pasadena and the rest of Pasadena as of January 1st, 2023. 9. City Council voted to extend an emergency interim ordinance to December of this year, setting development standards for the construction of multiple dwellings on single-family zone properties as allowed by Senate Bill 9, which has become a flashpoint in the battle between cities and the state for affordable housing. The ordinance is intended to mitigate some of the impacts of SB 9 and includes standards such as limits on the number of units, landscaping requirements, parking requirements, height limits, a prohibition on short-term rentals, and more. And 10, Governor Newsom rejected parole for Sirhan Sirhan, who assassinated Bobby Kennedy in 1968. Sirhan, who was a Pasadena resident and PCC student at the time of the shooting, was recommended for release by a parole board last August. Angela Berry, Sirhan Sirhan's lawyer, who told me in August that he would live in Pasadena if released from prison, said she would ask a judge to overturn Newsom's denial, and Sirhan will be scheduled for a new parole hearing no later than February 2023. So this story is not quite over yet. Let's patch in our guest, Martin Gordon. Martin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Martin is a longtime community activist and chair and CEO of the Pasadena Community Coalition. The mission of the coalition is to be a watchdog for the community and generate dialogue and action on quality of life issues. Martin's civil and human rights advocacy work spans several decades with many local organizations, such as the ACLU Pasadena Foothills Chapter's Police Practices Committee, NAACP Pasadena Altadena Chapter, the League of United Latin American Citizens, the League of Women Voters, Hollywood's Community Police Advisory Board, Leadership Pasadena, Men Educating Men About Health, and more. So Martin, let's jump right in here. One of the biggest stories this month, of course, is interim city manager Cynthia Kurtz appointing 2 rotating interim police chiefs to replace former Chief John Perez. What do you think about that decision? What should they have done differently? What should they do going forward?
Do you want me to laugh first or say something else? This is just ludicrous to start with. I like to make an analogy, just a quick one. If the president of the United States left, would you go and find somebody in the Congress or somebody else? Would you go to the vice president, or would it make sense to start rotating people through the presidency? This is a big thing in Pasadena. Who the chief is of the police department in Pasadena is a big deal, and so to think that a couple of things concern me about it. Number one is, who appointed her chief? Well, we know that John Perez appointed her chief. So by kind of saying we need to rotate people through, they're disrespecting John himself. He said, this is the person who I want, who I think can be here in place instead of me. Besides that, she's a 29-year, veteran of the force. She's done all these different things. I don't even want to go through it. I was looking at some of the things that she had done, including being on SWAT, being the first sergeant, to do a number of things. And I'm not even going to go through it. It's been all in the newspaper. The bottom line is, what does this kind of make you feel like? Immediately I start going, wait a minute, is there a little misogyny, a little racism, a little sexism? Is this a glass ceiling thing? Guess what, young Black woman? And woman too, I'm a woman too. There's a ceiling here for me. I don't like this. And it also it kind of makes me feel like the 2 Pasadenas again. We talked about this for many years, the 2 Pasadenas. There's a Pasadena for the white chief. It's a Pasadena for everybody. But when a Black person comes and gets that position, all of a sudden the rules change. John was okay to become the chief or the interim chief before becoming chief. And the excuse that I keep hearing, this came to me directly. And I want you, maybe you can understand it better than I can, because you're a lot smarter than I am, and I know that, Justin, is they said, well, you can't have her be the interim chief, because if you do that, other people may not apply for the job. Are you filthy kidding me? If they don't want to apply for the job, they don't belong in Pasadena. You know why? We are so hard on our chiefs that if a chief, interim chief scares you, do not apply. We don't want you here. So that just doesn't hold water. So the bottom line, somebody please tell me what the underlying thing is. Let me go one step further, because I'm not sure people are understanding this. I'm going to take the deputy chief, make her the interim chief for 4 months. Then I'm going to take a retired white male who reported to her, a commander who reported to her, take him, make him the chief, and tell her to report to him. Are you kidding me? She has to deal with the chain of command and whatever our city manager says. But if that was me, I probably would have jumped up and down and started slapping people. Of course, I'd be in jail now, and that's a whole nother thing. And we all know that we don't want me in there. But you get my point. That's outrageous. That's really saying, guess what? There's a good old boys club here, right? And the good old boys club says we have to have a white male to finish out this process. This Black woman needs to take a step back. There's a whole bunch of issues here. Bunch of issues here. I'm sure I went on a little bit too long because we've got a lot to cover. Does that kind of give you an idea? And the community is really up in arms. And one more thing I got to say is this: it's not whether or not she's going to become the chief of police. Who knows? Maybe she's not the right person for the chief of police, but she's definitely paid her dues to be the interim chief. And what does this say to the other rank and file who have worked hard and done their 29 years of service when they're looking at, they want to be chief or they want to be a commander? It says, if you're Black, you better watch out because it's not going to happen. Now we can move on.
And about social equity for legal cannabis, there's a new ballot initiative in the works called the People's Initiative to establish local ownership of commercial cannabis retail businesses, which would change the city's municipal code to allow 11 cannabis licenses, so an increase, and half of those must be social equity applicants and local residents that have been impacted by the war on drugs. So what are your thoughts on that, and how can Pasadena implement social equity in legal cannabis? Why is that important?
I don't know why you continue to try to make me laugh, right? Number one is, I don't think people really understand what social equity is. And we already have, now that we said we were going to put in 6 people who were going to get licenses here in Pasadena. All of these were rich, white companies that came from out of the state, makes lots of money. We said, part of social equity is the city didn't want any Black people or people of color to be in this first round. And part of social equity is that you have to give back to the community in some way. The most important way to give back to the community would have been to give us jobs. And I was in contact with all of the people who were retailers and said, guess what? Give us jobs. Don't give us money. I want to give you $50,000 for this and $50,000 for that. I agree with that. There's some programs, and I have one that I'll talk about later, I hope, that could go there. But guess what? $50,000 doesn't mean anything to me. If you give me 10 jobs for $40,000, there's $400,000 and a different quality of life for the people that are getting those jobs. So that's true social equity. And then also making partnerships with African Americans and people most affected by the drug wars. That's social equity. As far as the licensing, I agree. The city did a bad job. She did a very bad job. Actually, social equity license or license for people most affected by the drug war should have been the first thing they did. Now they're saying they're going to go there. The initiative, I read it 2 or 3 times. I've looked at what's going on around the country, Long Beach, Oakland, Los Angeles. Some of those things are horrible. Some of the things in this new initiative, some of them are positive, but number one, how many of them need to be social equity? All of them. All of them. In fact, I know somebody wrote this, and I'm happy that they're pushing the agenda forward. But guess what? It's time for us to get social equity. It's time for, some of these people that are now operating, they were illegal operators outside the state. So don't tell me. And now the criteria that you want to use if an African American or a person of color wants to get a license is that, well, you have to have been a drug dealer, or you have to have been convicted of a crime. You have to have a certain amount of income. I want you to have the income of a church mouse, and then you qualify. Wait a minute, you let all these rich people qualify? If you're Black, you qualify. If you live in Pasadena, you qualify. If you ever lived in Pasadena, you qualify. If you're a person of color, you qualify. So I don't want to hear this dynamic of, well, what we do on the other side is the big rich people can do whatever they want. They can have criminal convictions outside the state. They can do this, they can do that. But we want to narrow down to just as tiny as it can be. These are the only little Black people that can come in. The only little people of color come in. Shut up. We're all coming in. And when this gets to the Ed Tech committee, they better get ready, because Black people in particular, look at the stats. Black people in particular were the people most affected by the drug wars. Then Latinos, and then the rest of the minority community. But Black people in particular. In fact, the NAACP national office said, wow, we think social equity is reparations, for what's happened to us. Reparations, shoot, we're not getting a dime of it. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening with that. That's just outrageous. we got to change. I think that maybe our Councilman Hampton was right in the first place. We should have dumped it all, started over, and started with social equity. I bet you we see a different thing now. Then, I'm sorry, got off on it. You made me.
And what do you think about the canceling the Black History Parade, but not the Rose Parade?
Listen, I work with the Rose Parade and the Black History Parade. I worked with the Black History Parade during the time when one of the people that was in charge of the city told me, we don't want the Black History Parade to get too big. This is just for you little Black people in the Northwest. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? You know? And so there has been a kind of disrespect for the Black History Parade for years and years and years, that it's not important. It's the biggest Black History Parade, I believe, in Southern California. But I was told that it was not, and it was not important. And at one time when I wanted to expand it, I was told this is not something that needs to be expanded. So canceling the Black History Parade. Listen, the Rose Parade had a lot of ability to control the circumstances. I went to the parade because I wanted to see what it was going to do. The road, and they made sure that everybody that came in had either a COVID test saying they were negative, or they had been vaccinated, and they have a controlled environment. At the game, they had a controlled environment. So when they first said, well, we're going to cancel the Black History Parade, I said, I definitely want to be safe. I want Black people and all people to be safe. But I just saw a much more huge parade in which there was a way to control it. And there was a way to control that issue for the Black History Parade. It just was going to cost a little bit more money. We're going to have to maybe make sure that there was a certain way that you ingress and egress into the festival, to the parade itself. But we could have done that, but that costs money. Of course, they would never do this to the Rose Parade, because the Rose Parade makes millions and millions of dollars. And the Black History Parade, what does it do? Well, we kind of disrespect it a lot of times. And guess what? It costs us about $100,000. So now we don't have to spend $100,000. Bye, community. Bye. And we'll do it on Zoom like we're doing right now, because that only cost me 12 cents. Come on. They could have done something. And maybe we could have done the festival, but we definitely could have done the parade, and it definitely could have been something done in that way. And so I think it was disrespectful just to come up and say, oh, guess what? You know, since we got a lot of money, this is fine. And this is no disrespect to the Tournament of Roses. I want them to make money. In fact, when they make some money, they need to give some to the Black History Parade, a whole lot more. So the difference, though, again, the two Pasadenas, the thought of how you deal with money, the thought of how you deal with Black people in Pasadena, big difference.
And in 2015, well, for years before that, you called for the tournament to increase diversity among its senior staff. So what progress has been made since then? What still needs to be done?
Well, you know, in 2015, let me just tell you something people forget. This went back to 1993. 1993, when Danny Bakewell, Jimmy Morris, and Joe Brown, and a few other people stopped the parade and said, listen, you have got to put African Americans in particular, and people of color, and make diversity come to the Tournament of Roses. And so since that time, we did have the first African American president of the Tournament of Roses. And I don't know, some of you might have remembered when we came forward and we did a big event for Gerald Freeney. Hi, Gerald, out there. And we did a big event for the first Latina president of the Tournament of Roses. And so we like that. There has been some significant change and some significant help from the Tournament of Roses to get diversity going. Do we need to do more? Yes. Do we have some good things happening? Yes. But believe me, I meet with them on a regular basis, and we are moving strongly forward to make sure that we have good representation in our community, and that we also have some good connections with the Black community, the Black History Parade, and all people of color. And this year, we want to go back to having a community event at the Tournament of Roses house. It was awesome. I know my time is up. I want to tell you one significant thing that really is important to me. And it's about Dolores Higginbottom. And you know, Dolores Higginbottom just recently passed. I don't want to get too upset about it. Let me just go back. She recently passed. She was a wonderful, 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 wonderful woman. And I remember when Gerald Freeney became the first president, of the Tournament of Roses, and we had that big event. She came to me, and I was real busy that way because I had a lot of things that I had to do, right? And she said, "Martin, come here." She said, "Come here." Oh, Dolores, no, Dolores, I'm busy. Anyway, I got to Dolores, and Dolores looked me in the eye. She said, "Martin, I want to tell you something." She said, "I love you for this." I said, "What?" She said, I can't believe that I stayed alive to see the first president of the Tournament of Roses. She said, "I love this." She said, "But I want to tell you, this is the first time I have ever been invited to or ever been in the Tournament of Roses house." And at that time, she was 87 years old. That's outrageous. That's not, that's what we're talking about. I found out later that she's been to every single Tournament of Roses until the day she died. Every single one. And her highlight was that she finally got invited to the Tournament of Roses. And we're all invited again this year. That's what this is about. I know I went too far.
Martin, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk to me about your work in the community.
Thank you. I hope you'll have me back. I got a lot more to say, my brother.
Thank you. Take care. Before we go, here is this month in Pasadena history. It was this month in 1931 when Albert Einstein first visited Pasadena. He also visited in the winters of 1932 and 1933. While here, he watched the Rose Parade from a second-floor suite of a bank building on Colorado Boulevard, hobnobbed with celebrities such as Charlie Chaplin, played violin with the conductor of the LA Philharmonic, visited the Huntington Library and Gardens, dedicated a new observatory at PCC, lived on and rode a bike around the Caltech campus, and spent time at Mount Wilson Observatory, where he refined and confirmed his theory of relativity. He is quoted as saying, "Here in Pasadena, it is like paradise. Always sunshine and clear air, gardens with palms and pepper trees, and friendly people who smile at one and ask for autographs. Scientifically, it is very interesting, and my colleagues are wonderful to me." In January 1933, Einstein delivered a national radio broadcast from the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, calling for peaceful relations with Germany. A few days later, Adolf Hitler became chancellor, and Einstein never set foot in his homeland again. Because of Einstein's opposition to war, J. Edgar Hoover's FBI was watching him while in Pasadena and kept a file on him that ran 1,400 pages long. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of NewsRap Local. Tune in every third Friday of the month at 5 p.m. Learn more at pasadenamedia.org and justindouglaschapman.com. Sign up for my monthly email newsletter to get updates on my work by visiting justinchapman.substack.com. See you next month.